Well, hi everyone. This is Karli Viña here for episode 274 of At Percussion. Today with me, as usual, are our co-host Casey Cangelosi. How's it going, Casey?
Hey, how's it going, Karli? It's going
Yeah,
good.
pretty good, thanks. Ben Charles is here. How's it going in Texas, Ben?
Hey Carly, I've been doing very well here. I've been fortunate. I never lost power or water or anything like that, but I know our library had some pretty extensive damage to it. So yeah, thinking about everyone in Texas right now.
Yeah.
Aren't you not that far from Dallas, Fort Worth? Isn't it like terrible right there?
About an hour and a half. Yeah, I mean, I think it varies depending on where you are in the energy grid or whatever. I know some people in Dallas haven't had any problems, and some that have had severe problems. So yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, we're glad you're doing okay, Ben, and through the storm, and thinking about any of our listeners that might have had more struggles and challenges in the storm. Hopefully, things are cleared up soon by the time this episode airs. Ksenija is out today because she has her premiere of the piano and percussion version of Rite of Spring, which is very exciting. So I'm sure we'll hear about that next week from her. But Casey, what happened on our release date in history? It's March 4th.
Yeah, sure. I've got some audio and video hints for you. So here's the first. That is guitarist Mary Osborne, who maybe you've never heard of, but she died at age 70 today in 1992. She came to prominence in New York City in the 1940s and played with other jazz musicians such as Dizzy Gillespie, Art Tatum, Coleman Hawkins, and Thelonious Monk. After moving to California in 1968, her and her husband founded the Osborne Guitar Company, which I had never heard of, and I didn't think Osborne guitars were something that any of my friends played or talked about or anything, but apparently, yeah, they're these vintage guitars, and I guess they were very popular at one point, and the company does still exist. But I think, yeah, you don't find them anywhere. But yeah, Mary Osborne, really prominent guitar player in jazz. Let's see. Also in 1965, I've talked about this piece before, and I basically try to share this recording every chance I get on this show. I've definitely shared it before, but this will probably sound and look familiar to you all. This is Ligeti's, well, my version of Ligeti's Poème Symphonique for 100 metronomes. Get some sound here in a second. So we have talked about this on the show before, more than once, I
Oh, play
believe,
the whole
but
thing. Play the whole thing, man. What are you doing? Don't cut it short.
the whole thing is part of why this piece is interesting. And I'm not going to rehash all what this piece is about again, but let's see, what do I want to say? So this was the first US performance, happened on release date March 4th, and it was in, like I said, 1965. Ligeti's symphonic poem for 100 metronomes. US premiere was in Buffalo, New York. There's a lot of news today. Janis Joplin in 1970 was fined $200 for using obscene language on stage in Tampa, Florida. So that makes her extra cool. Antonio Vivaldi was born in 1678. Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake, the ballet, the very famous ballet, premiered in 1877. Also, Romeo and Juliet, the famous cymbal excerpt that we have. If you can't play that, then you can't play cymbals. That's the law. 1870 was that first performance. And one of my favorite bands had their one and only gold record certified. The record is called Stranger Than Fiction. It's definitely not their best album, but Bad Religion is my favorite punk rock band from my childhood for sure. And I don't think gold records are rare in punk rock, but they're probably rare in this kind of punk rock, because like the real popular punk rock is that Blink 182, Melancholy, who else is in that group? I don't know, but like that whiny high school sucks and breakups are hard kind of punk rock. And yeah, I'm sure those have all sorts of gold and platinum records, but good punk rock, yeah, it's not so popular. So that was March 4th for you.
I feel a little triggered by that last comment. I was a pretty big Blink 182 fan back in the day.
Yeah, No, it's good. Yeah, I liked Blink 182 too, for sure. But you think about like what, it's what that is about. It's like, oh yeah, high school sucks, growing up sucks. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
It's kind of
it's a
weird
big thing
hearing a
when
bunch of
you're 13.
it's kind of weird hearing a bunch of men in their mid 40s talking about how like their high school breakup was hard and how getting their driver's license is a drag or whatever. So
It
anyway,
is a drag,
bad
man.
religion bad religion doesn't sing about that
We're
kind of
not
jazz.
over it.
You're you're not. Yep. So anyway,
Well, thanks. That was a real mashup of a lot of different kinds of history.
I had to really pick and choose. It's like, oh, okay, dig into. I didn't know who Mary Osborne was, so I thought that was worth highlighting. And she has all this video out there on YouTube. That video I showed you, she's playing right next to Billie Holiday in it. So yeah, like I said, I mean, Thelonious Monk, Dizzy Gillespie. I mean, she was really, really prominent jazz guitarist.
That's super cool. I had never heard of her either.
We're drummers, so
Well, yeah.
we're excused.
Don't expect too much from us, I suppose. Well, without further ado, I'm very happy to introduce today's guest. Dr. Jillian Baxter is with us. Jillian serves as the assistant professor of music at Albany State University in Albany, Georgia, where she teaches applied percussion, percussion methods, music theory, and music appreciation. She was recently elected to serve on the PAS Board of Advisors. She is very active in the PAS Diversity Alliance and in the University Pedagogy Committee. She's been involved in several panel and roundtable discussions recently, including one as part of PASIC 2020 with the Diversity Alliance. She holds degrees in percussion performance from the University of Georgia, from Belmont University, and Middle Tennessee State University. Welcome to the show, Jillian. It's so great to see you.
Thanks. I'm so excited to be here with all of you.
Hey, thanks. Well, I'd love to hear a little about what has teaching looked like at Albany State for you this year. Have you faced any kind of specific challenges or found any unexpected benefits, things that work really well teaching during the pandemic?
Well, I know when everything hit, early last year, I think for everybody it was just kind of very tough. It was just a hey, we got shut down, go home, and everybody just had to go to virtual teaching. So that spring semester, 2020 was a challenge for pretty much everybody. I think for a lot of people, teaching virtually was not something they were accustomed to doing. So used to face to face. I know for me, transitioning to, I'm used to teaching applied lessons face to face, and now, oh, we've got to do this virtually. How are we going to do this? When students don't have marimbas and timpani at home, and it really challenged me to be a little bit more creative, about um, techniques and what can we really do to keep them going. In this fall, I've been very lucky, I would say, that I thought that we were going to come back and still have this whole virtual thing going on, which is what a lot of universities are. But we actually came back with kind of options for everybody, as far as you could come back hybrid if you wanted, you could come back face to face, you could do virtual. We had a lot of student options. And luckily for a lot of our music classes, we were able to put them in larger spaces to where we could meet face to face. And so we still had students that were maybe not as excited to come back or just still scared with everything going on that stayed home and went virtually. Pretty much all of my percussion students came back face to face. So it was really neat. And I got to do percussion ensemble. I actually did percussion ensemble pieces, while other people didn't. I was thinking that I was going to have to learn how to do, recordings and have them all over the screen, all the cool things, everything everybody does now. But I was able to do everything face to face. And this semester, spring, has been about the same. We are trucking along. I get to see everybody every day, and that's been really neat. But even with that, I think it totally changed my mindset on how to teach, you know, um, because you can't rest on all the things that you were used to having before. So, whereas I was always really into technique, I think I went even farther in depth into technique, and this is what the hands look like, and this is how you do these strokes, and this is how it feels on, it just opened up my mind And I think I became just got better at explaining things, if nothing else.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we're all better at talking about technique because there's only so much you can see on the camera on either end.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And can we all
Absolutely.
just can we all just agree we're tired of those Zoom like videos, click track videos? Can we all just now universally agree that that's not cool anymore?
It was very cool
It
about
was.
For a
8, 9 months
second, yeah.
ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really cool for like a week. It's like, how do you do that? Oh,
You know,
everyone goes to
one,
click, and then
one
like
thing
everyone does it once, and you're like, okay, we don't need to do that ever
one
again.
thing with those that I've wondered about is like I think it's like not so musical when everyone just records with the click track in their ear, then like the professor puts it all together. But I'm like, what if like one person recorded with the click track, and then the second person like recorded to them with only the click and like the places where they weren't playing, and you like kind of cycled through it, and then you went back to the first person and they re-recorded, and you did that a couple of times. So it would be a huge pain because you'd be
Hey,
constantly re-editing. But like, would you be able to take out some of the clickness of it?
uh-huh. Hey, remember how we played Wilcoxon just live on Zoom, and we tried to play unison? We just said 1, 2, ready, go, and it was sort of like the Ligeti poem you just
That's
heard.
better. Yeah.
Pretty
I
much.
think I think do that.
Well, Ben, I think you have something.
Well, oh God, I have quite a doozy of a question, Jillian. And if you'll allow me to ramble for a second as part of my question. So one thing that's come to light a lot recently that I've realized is I always felt like civil rights were something we studied in school, that was a thing of the past. It happened in like the 60s and 70s. We solved all the problems, and then we're living in modern society now where we fixed all those issues. Obviously, that's not the case. Obviously, that's recently come very much to light. And one thing that's been enlightening to me is systemic issues in both music and education. And we'll talk about, I have a little topic on the musical side later. But on the terms of education, I know that you teach at an HBCU, and I've been actually reading about them recently because Apple just had a big diversity initiative where they've pledged $100 million toward HBCUs and education for minorities. And so could you tell us about what do you feel like is the role of the HBCU in a modern educational landscape?
Yeah, that was a real doozy of a question. You were right. Um,
And if I could give you a second to think, I did see someone online posted something about, I graduated high school with like a 1.2 GPA. The only school I was accepted to was an HBCU. I went there, I learned how to be a student, graduated, with honors, and went on to graduate school. So I think that could maybe be a starting place for it.
yeah, the HBCUs have a great place, foundationally, across the board, no matter what type of student wants to go there. Um, what kind of happens in our environment is we are probably a lot more family oriented, meaning that people just feel better by coming on campus. I find for me as a teacher, I feel like I have like 100 students, but they're also like my children, and they probably see me as such, as like a mother. Whereas, if I were going to a non-HBCU, it has a little bit more of a feel, more standoffish, especially to someone who looks like me. Okay. So a lot of a lot of people will choose to come to HBCU simply because of the environment, that feeling of belonging, feeling that it doesn't matter what I look like, where I came from, I have a place here and I can kind of make my way. So that's a lot of what people will find at a HBCU. Now, um, even though it's a historically Black college, that doesn't mean that there are only Black students that go there. There are all kinds of students that go there, and even if I were not Black, students will still find a place to feel, involved, to feel a part of. Yeah, and you mentioned that part. I think you're talking about kind of like that access. Okay, starting off, you know, for some of the larger state schools, for instance, because there's so many people that are trying to get into those schools, the criteria to getting gets higher and higher and higher. If you're going to have, 50,000 students that come in, I can have the qualifications of 3.9 GPA. You have to be, because there's so many people who want to go there, which our HBCUs traditionally have a little bit smaller campus. Our, classroom sizes can be a little bit smaller. Doesn't have to be. We still have huge classes, but it's just a friendlier environment. You could come in with a slightly lower GPA. You still have to work just as hard. But there probably are some people who are going to pull up their sleeves, work a little bit harder to get you where you need to be versus you're here, get it, good luck. And so that's, that difference in being at an HBCU versus a non-HBCU. It's kind of that environment, that feeling of belonging, so to speak.
And the drum lines are like way funner.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. You get to do a whole lot of cool dancing and groovy music. I mean, who doesn't love that?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm glad you said that because I came across this quote today, and I was probably looking for an excuse to use this, but I already sent it to our little group chat in prep for this. I was watching this documentary called Abstracts today, and there was a quote from it. It says, this is by Ilsa Crawford. She says, "An art school has to be a mixture of a monastery, a pub, and a sweatshop." And I think we can all kind of think about those three things and like, okay, there's the monastery part, there's the, yeah, and like, I think the pub part is kind of what you're talking about. Like it has to feel like a family. You have to feel welcome there. You have to feel like you're comfortable around the people you're around.
That's why it's mandatory to have a beer on the podcast.
Nobody told me this.
Well, I'm also the only one. So they're all in violation, actually, of standard protocol.
Yeah, you just can't get us to follow all the rules, Casey.
Please follow protocol. I'm sorry. I think Karli, I think you were next, actually.
Well, yeah, I'm thinking about a lot of the issues that we're having during the pandemic. The pandemic, for me, I think, has highlighted so many issues with access in education, and especially with percussion. And Jillian, I wanted to ask you about your GMEA presentation that you did recently, which I think was about, well, the title I'll share, and then I'll let you tell us what it was about. Level Up, a game plan for improving skills of percussionists with limited time and resources. So kind of dealing with some of the challenges people are having with access right now. Would you tell us about your presentation?
Yes, it was a really fun presentation. Joe Moore and Teddy Hall and I all joined in to kind of split off. We actually took an instrument category apiece and kind of broke down, um, if in a perfect world, everybody would walk in as a freshman and know everything on every instrument and have every grip down and you could just teach them everything, just take off and running. But we all know in the real world that's not how it works. Some students come in with deficiencies. I may read really well on snare drum, but I don't read on keyboards. I've never tuned a timpani, and these students come and you teach them. I think there are probably some places where they would be turned away and they just know, but in the real world, there are more universities in the United States that you can walk on campus. I can be great at this one area, but I'm not so great over here. So our clinic kind of went through, you know, we realistically have 4 years to get these students to a certain point. So when they walk in the door and they can't read pitch percussion very well, they don't have that great match grip and their hands look wonky. What do you do to get them there and what's the efficient way to do it? So we kind of broke down in a snare drum category. I did keyboards, two mallet keyboards, and we did timpani as those big three. Here are some of the basic techniques from grip. Any student that walks in, whether they already play really great or not, these are the things you really need to look at, and that might help them, move any faster. Grip, um, helping them to read. I think for keyboards, I talked about if they're not feeling great at reading, start with a small category of notes. Um, Actually speaking notes out loud, making sure you're sight reading every time you see them, encouraging them and teaching them how to sight read. That's really what the whole clinic was about. And we kind of broke it down really to the bottom floor. This is what they need to know. And if they know this, then you can build up on that. Because if they don't have really great technique, everything else is just going to be difficult and horrible anyway.
Well, that's so important because at many schools, I think it's common, state universities and just a lot of schools, there are students that can do amazing things that just haven't had access to instruction and access to, just the information. So that's so important that we're willing to work and say, here's what you need to know to get from point A to point B. And then as long as they do the work, they'll be in good shape.
Yeah, I think it has, just kind of adding to what you said, I think it has to do with that idea of what success is. I think everybody kind of has a different definition of what success may be. And depending on where you are, where you started from, that looks different. I guess for me, success pretty much is pretty simple. Is when you walk in the door, where you are now is this pinpoint, and over time have you progressed from that point, and that's a success. If I've changed, if I've learned something, if I've grown, even if it was only an inch, that still should be a success. And some people have a totally different idea. It has to be way up here, to be successful. But success is just, I start somewhere and I increase to another point. So I think it's just changing that whole mindset across the board.
I
Yeah,
think
absolutely. It's that
it's so great.
trajectory.
Sorry, I was gonna say it's so great what you're saying. Like it's like I think all music educators have this fantasy that they're teaching at Juilliard, and it's like like if you're teaching at like a
I
small
am,
high,
man. I am.
like it's okay. Like we're just trying to make music. It's You're not trying to win the New York Phil audition. Like just improve where you are. It's fine.
It's a little tricky, isn't it? Because we're talking about when are you finished, or where the benchmarks are, and I know a lot of the discussion, and especially like the idea of access to universities, like sometimes it's suggested we should change standards, or we should alter where those benchmarks are in order to let more people in. And it's hard because the benchmarks aren't determined by us, they're determined by the world. It's like, well, until that New York Phil audition includes other music, like, so people, for instance, I mentioned, gosh, in the news here just now, I mentioned, three dead white guys, Ligeti, Vivaldi, and help me out, who else did I mention? Ligeti, Vivaldi, and Tchaikovsky, and the Tchaikovsky, crash cymbal excerpt. It's like people promote, like, oh, well, don't keep teaching the Tchaikovsky Romeo and Juliet cymbal excerpt. Let's substitute that with something else. Like, man, I'd love to, but like, it's really hard to move that benchmark, because until the world asks for something else, like, we kind of have a responsibility to keep doing that. So it's I don't know, I don't know where that fits into this exactly, but it's somewhere in that access and that like benchmark conversation, if that makes sense. It's kind of a drag. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I'm not happy about that. I'm not happy about that. I'm just saying that's
No,
that's the
I
thing.
think you're absolutely right. I mean, it kind of limits you to what you really can do, or puts people in a place where they feel like I have to do this, because if I don't, then I don't look this way, or I'm not being successful in the world, or if we want to talk about social media, I have to have these pieces, and my students are performing this, and and therefore I don't have a successful program because I'm not doing what the world says I should do. So
Hmm.
it's just kind of an ugly circle.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, maybe as somewhat of a counterpoint to what you're saying, Casey, I think you can also like look at where the ball is going and
Hmm.
realize like, okay, well, like maybe we do need to have a William Grant Stills extra out there because that's probably going to come up one day. And also, I mean, there are
Yeah.
outside of the talk of diversity, it's like crash cymbals are crash cymbals. Like we generally play them the same way, and you can apply your Tchaikovsky technique to any other composer's crash cymbal excerpt. It's like it's listening skills. It's technique, things like that. It's not reinventing the wheel every time you pick up a pair of crash cymbals.
Yeah. But until they're asking for it, it's like if you have a student saying, I want to win an orchestra
Yeah,
job.
I don't think it also like it doesn't necessarily need to be an either or thing. Also, like you can do both Tchaikovsky and something else.
Yeah.
Sorry, Karli, I think you had.
Well, and you can substitute in another place, like do it in percussion ensemble, So don't do Varese. Nobody's asking for Varese, Yeah, yeah, you can fill that role somewhere else. Certainly, that's what I think in general a lot of people are doing more and more all the time.
Right, yeah. Well, what I was thinking about, Jillian mentioned a couple of times the definition of success, and it reminded me of this Maya Angelou quote. You guys might be familiar with it. It's success is liking yourself, liking what you do, and liking how you do it. And I've always thought, like, that's very nice. It's different than what we're talking about with this. Success is growth, no matter what the actual specific benchmark is, but growth in any amount, towards improving and towards learning and all of that. But I've always liked that quote. Ben, do you think it's a good time to shift right into your topic? Speaking of presentation.
Sure. Well, since Jillian mentioned GMEA, there was some news a couple weeks ago from TMEA, Texas Music Educators Association, I wanted to talk about today. To make a long story short, there was a clinic by a bassoon teacher, and he had this slide, and it was how to choose the right students. I'm assuming he means beginning band students for bassoon. And he says, intangible characteristics including self-motivation, intelligence, socioeconomic status, prepackaged musical knowledge, and stable home. And he goes on to talk about socioeconomic status, never prohibitive, but should be taken into account when regarding the expense of reads and lessons, and also the stable home thing, like do they live in an apartment or a house? And obviously these are things that will be barriers to learning bassoon, but they will also be barriers to learning any instrument. So I think the question comes, why would you use these things as qualifiers for any instrument when they are, just intrinsically related to learning of an instrument? And so I did some digging on systemic issues with classical music, and there were many articles on the topic, some of which I thought were very well thought out, some of which seemed sort of a little heavy-handed, and let's just throw Beethoven under the bus for the sake of throwing Beethoven under the bus. But I found one that I really liked from the New York Times called Black Artists on How to Change Classical Music. And for context, Black players make up less than 2% of the nation's orchestras, and the Metropolitan Opera has still, in 2021, yet to put on a single work by a Black composer. So this article asked 9 different Black musicians about their thoughts on the topic of how to change classical music. And I picked out 4 quotes in particular that I liked. You can find the full article to see who all the people are. A couple notable names on the list that I'm not going to talk about right now are clarinetist Anthony McGill and composer Terence Blanchard, both of whom I was familiar with. But the 4 quotes I wanted to bring up, one was from bassoonist Monica Ellis, who plays in the Imani Winds Quintet. She says, the first step is admitting that these organizations are built on a white framework built to benefit white people. Have you done the work to create a structure that is actually benefiting Black and Brown communities? When that occurs, diversity is a natural byproduct. Conductor Thomas Wilkins says, in Philadelphia, for a community concert, they once found a high school that was acoustically inferior, aesthetically no comparison, the chorus and the audience behind me. It made no sense except for the joy that it brought to the community to have the Philadelphia Orchestra in their backyard. They want to have some sense that they count and they matter, and by going there, it's us saying, yes, you do. Conductor Roderick Cox says, I would like changes to be made in how we train musicians in conservatories and universities. A lot of our thinking and our perception of what's good music becomes indoctrinated at that stage. If students learn about composers like William Grant Still or Florence Price and their approaches to making music, then they will become more versatile. Schools won't just be producing conductors who want to do Wagner, Strauss, and Mahler. And then lastly, composer Tanya Leon says, certain groups of people have felt that they did not belong because most of the time they didn't see people who resembled them on stage. But even if things look good on stage, internally, is that what is happening at the institution? It's a family type thing. That person working in the office goes home and tells the people at home that they usually have their other friends. That is how audiences change. It has to be from inside out. So I thought that was some great insight from musicians on how to change the classical music world. And also, sorry, if I could add one thing to that, about going back to the TMEA thing for a second. TMEA actually removed that content and tweeted out, they said, content was presented during a 2021 clinic that was inconsistent with TMEA's vision, purpose, and support of high quality music education for all students. We therefore removed the clinic. TMEA's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion is rooted in continuing conversations among educators to better serve our students and members. So,
I think I would also add that that guy missed the second slide, and that is that even if you wanted to look for those things, you're not allowed to. So, so what a dipshit for a lot of reasons. But like, first of all, I mean, aside from being a, you know, a horrible person, it would seem, but also like, you're just not allowed to do that. You know, like you're certainly not given the allowance to like probe for that kind of information from people. So I thought it was just kind of a joke, you know. That's all.
Well, thanks, Ben. That was a lot, and a lot covering a whole lot of topics, and I think we could delve so deep. But I wonder, Jillian, if you have any thoughts you'd like to share on TMEA or on any of those quotes Ben shared from the article.
Well, as far as the TMEA, one of my friends had, mentioned it to me a while back when it came out, and I think it even sent me pictures of the slides. And I think I looked at them for a moment, and I really thought it was a joke. I thought, oh, somebody just made a meme, and I had no idea until later that somebody really had done this at a presentation. I really didn't think it was real. Um, and looking at that, just like Casey said, those are things that you're not allowed to look for. But, if you were using that as a criteria, wouldn't we just be knocking out so many people everywhere? You can't, I mean, the whole purpose of music, we think of it as a universal language. Isn't that what we say it is? So should it not universally be allowed for everyone? That's the whole thing. We can speak and reach so many people through music, they are places that they don't have the capacity to buy instruments, so they make them out of whatever they can find. So it kind of blows my mind that somebody would even have that in their mindset. It defeats the whole purpose, or anybody who truly loves music the way I think that people are passionate about it. I mean, you would want everybody to be able to be a part. So if I were to meet somebody who didn't have the financial means or whatever means, I would be looking to try to see what I could do to help them versus just shutting them out. So that's globally what I kind of just felt about that. I really couldn't believe that was real, and that's just not going to work in the real world. As far as the rest of your article talking about all those quotes, I had read that article originally, and it was a really beautiful article, and there's so many great things in there. And I think there is a divide between why do we not have um, so many Black artists in classical music. And some of that is a stigma of how was that presented. If I went to the everyday Black household, they're not going to be playing Beethoven and Tchaikovsky and Schumann and things like that. And that's not good music, but that's just not, you know, the thing. But if I flipped it the other way, if I went to a white household, they're not going to be playing, Whitney Houston and Beyonce, so, it's why are we discrediting one for the other? I mean, isn't good music just great music? So we, I guess all to say, until we one stop putting certain music on a pedestal and we just acknowledge that if music is good, it's just good. It doesn't matter what genre it is, who wrote it, when, period. Music is just good. And stop that. I think about I teach a music appreciation class. And I was teaching students, and it's a historically Black college, so most of the students are there are Black, and I'm trying to talk about Beethoven and Tchaikovsky, and it's just going. Whew. But then I'm like, hey, check out this symphony, the Afro Symphony by William Grant Steele, and they're like, oh my God, that's the most incredible thing, and that was awesome. And then I'm like talking to them about the woodwinds and the strings, and this is what a symphony is, and they are totally locked in. And then they're like, man, classical music is awesome because they have that link of, oh wow, this is somebody who looks like me. They are doing this genre that you keep talking about. I think I might actually lock into this. So I mean, making it, tangible, um, seeing people actually having somebody that looks like them actually doing that. There's just so many spots to that. I just kind of get overwhelmed just thinking about, how this can be so different. And it's once again a mindset. How do we present the music? We've just got to stop that big divide.
It's so important. And I feel like I've been hit over the head with this so many times in the last couple of years, really, how important representation is, because I wasn't as aware of it when I was a kid, thinking about the musicians that I saw or the teachers that I studied with. But it is so like what a difference it can make knowing it's not just old dead white guys we're talking about, but there are Black people involved in this too. And and what a difference that can make. Ben, did you have something?
Oh yeah, I was going to add, Jillian. I had the exact same reaction when I saw that slide. I was like, oh, this is a joke. Like this is like a little meme something. And it's like, wait, this was actually presented. Like Jesus, what? So you're not alone in that. But yeah, then also I had so many things I thought of while you were talking about. One of the things, I think I've said it on the podcast before, there's this series called The 70s, and it was like produced by CNN. I think it's on Netflix, but they do an episode on music, and they talk about the Jackson 5. And they had a Black commentator that said, when we saw the Jackson 5 on TV, we couldn't believe it. We said it looks like us on TV. Like we've never seen that. And so yeah, it's so like, again, refreshing to hear about, like, yeah, like just because this composer, like you identify with this composer, it makes it that much more relevant and important to you. And I know when the conductor Riccardo Muti of the Chicago Symphony took the reins in 2011-ish, somewhere around there. It was his mission to bring the symphony out to the community, and they played at a prison, or maybe I think it was actually like a juvenile detention center, and he brought a very prominent Black tenor to the prison to sing, and the students were, at the prison were saying, we felt something. He was talking to us with this old music. So yeah, it's interesting to see that idea of representation.
Well, bringing it back to the TMEA fiasco for just a minute, I had a couple of thoughts reading about all of this. I actually didn't think it was a joke. I thought, wow, how could somebody get away with saying this in a national and potentially international with online attendance kind of conference? But I thought, wow. Did they not ask to see the materials? Did they not talk about it? And then I thought, well, I presented at FMEA 2 years ago or a year ago and submitted like 3 or 4 sentences. Here's my topic. And then it was, okay, see you in Tampa. So I don't know if I imagine things are probably going to be a little tighter, at least in Texas, with that sort of thing. And one other thought that I had was he might be this person, I don't even remember his name, might be the only person saying this out loud to other people that I screen students for this, but I'm sure there are a lot of people who teach all different instruments that are looking for students that are wealthy and can pay for lessons, and looking for students that can afford a really nice instrument, because it, in programs where achievement is pushed, that makes your job easier if you're a band director, for example, I imagine. And then the third thing that I thought of with all of this is really it's not even so much to me. This person has ideas that clearly don't reflect the value of most educators. Like this is so wrong in so many ways, but in the end, it's really like the system that is failing the students. That why do we have? I mean, I think it brings back a point, Jillian, when you were talking about how do we define success in a lot of band programs, the awards and the prizes that the students take and the band takes, that's success. And I think there's so much pressure to get there. But how do we change the system so that it serves the students? And ultimately what we want is students to be growing and learning artistically.
I think we all need to go to our respective bassoon colleagues and just toilet paper. Karli, you're married to a bassoonist. Why
That's
is it?
I
He needs to
probably knew
get.
about this before any of you because it was like last weekend.
He answers for this on air right now.
He was also disgusted by it, just for the record.
Take care of your people over there, Karli. And my buddy Sue Barber, I'm coming for you. You're gonna answer for this. I was gonna say that I don't know, Karli and I went at different times to the Boston Conservatory. That's a place we attended a degree. And I don't know about you, Karli, but a lot of the fellow students around me, they were very taken care of in their youth. They went to New England Preparatory Academy. They went to Juilliard Pre-College. They went to Aspen, Tanglewood. They like did everything. They came from the camp you teach at, and I've taught it, but you teach it a lot more than I do.
What, interlocking?
Yeah, Interlochen. Like they're Interlochen kids, and I mean, my class of kids, a lot of those students didn't really go anywhere. Um, and that's not to say it's a really super good unilateral comparison to other colleges, because I think I was very lucky. I wasn't as lucky as them. My parents were not Hollywood musician helicopter parents the way a lot of those parents are, of like, oh yeah, you're gonna know these conductors and you're gonna know everything that the conductors and your teachers have done at those schools, and you're going to go to New England Conservatory Preparatory Academy and you're going to do all that stuff. A lot of those kids didn't do that great. In fact, every one of them I can think of that did that isn't still doing music. So I don't know, like the bassoonist idea that this is what you need to look for. I bet there's a lot more science than feeling that it's maybe not entirely true. And maybe the contrary is true.
Well, I think it's not the strongest indicator of a student's success, even, their home life, their finances, anything like that. Like I see this in South Florida, and especially in Miami. There's a huge gap. There's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of disadvantaged people, and then there's a lot of wealth. And there's not a whole lot in the middle, is what I find compared to other places that I've taught and lived. And it's not the biggest indicator in my experience. What students need is, we all know this, consistent practice, consistent, in a certain sense, like they do need to have a supportive environment that is conducive to them doing the work they need to do. Like there are circumstances that need to be there, but struggles are not prohibitive.
Yeah, yeah, and don't get me wrong. I mean, gosh, I feel like I grew up in a super lucky environment, like super, super duper lucky, but I didn't go to New England Preparatory Academy. I didn't go to blah, blah, blah pre-college. I didn't go to Aspen. I didn't go to ZMF. I went to ZMF once. I didn't go to a thing every summer and all that. So I don't know. I mean, of course, it's a balance we're talking about.
Well, I do want to ask you, Jillian. In the fall, I saw you were elected to serve on the PAS Board of Advisors. So, congratulations for that. That's wonderful. Would you tell us a little bit about your work with the Board of Advisors? I actually realized as I'm thinking about you and what you're doing, I thought, I don't know exactly what the Board of Advisors for PAS does.
Yeah, I'm just getting on there, so I'm just, learning all, what my responsibilities are. But, essentially you have, like a board of directors and you have a board of advisors. As a member of the board of advisors, I'm kind of like that voice, one of those voices for the masses. So, there's thousands of people who may be, in the percussion community or members of PAS, and when it comes down to making a decision that's good for the community at large, you have to have people who you can talk to about that or bring forward perspectives of the whole. Because you can't always go and ask all 5,000 people, what do you think, or do a survey. So as one of those advisor members, I'm seriously kind of the voice for you, for, here's this idea, we're thinking about changing this, what do you think about it? If there are any concerns that may not have been brought up, I'm one of those people that would be able to voice that. Have you thought about this? Or, I can at least put my, those views, not just my views, but I can take it to anybody and say, what are your perspectives? How do you view this? And let me take it back and kind of put it on the floor. So that's kind of how that works.
Well, I'm so glad you are there on the board because I'm sure you have so much to offer with your perspective. Speaking of PAS and your involvement there, I know you've done a lot of work with the Diversity Alliance. You are the gender issues point person. And I wanted to ask you, do you feel that it's a bit of a responsibility to be an advocate in our field for diversity? And if so, does it feel like it weighs on you at times?
I think it's definitely something that has to be done. And yeah, it is kind of weighty. I think for me, being female and African American, I almost have like a dual kind of role. Like people are looking at me as the female, perspective, and then also the African American perspective. And so um, sometimes it can be a little bit of emotionally heavy because you want to represent well. I think um, you might think more about what you say or what you do, and trying to make sure you feel like you're just that role model or that person that everybody's always looking to. So you want to make sure you do a good job more so than some people can just do whatever, say whatever, do whatever. It doesn't matter. Um, so it can be a little heavy. Like it's a bigger responsibility. I can't just do anything like some other people because, if I do, I will definitely get called on the carpet. I will be all over somebody's going to say something, it's going to be all over social media. Somebody's, more so than some other people that I might, know. Um, but I still think it's kind of a responsibility or things that has to be done because that's the only way we're going to have change. Percussion has for a long time been a predominantly male oriented instrument, and that's been a mindset for a long time. I came up, thinking middle school, high school, there weren't many other females in, playing percussion. I remember wanting to play in the drum line and wanting to play, tenor drums and, multi tenors. And they were like, no, you can't do that. That's not what, you're going to have to go play in front ensemble, that stigma, girls have to play mallets and guys, but, I've come up through all of that, when I went to different, I guess, different things. Like I went to interlocking and things like that. I got to see, different people, and it was like really neat because it wasn't so, male and female. It's got to be this. I was there with, a couple other females at the time in percussion, but then they all felt that they had to be really aggressive because, I have to compete with men and men have aggressive spirits. So I have to have this persona to compete. We just have a lot going on with that male versus female thing. Um, so yeah, it's something that has to be done. It's been really neat coming into being part of the gender concerns subcommittee and talking to other members to see what they feel or what do they want to work on, and no matter where they are, I have members that are in New York and out west and things like that, and they're all saying kind of the same thing. They're tired of being in a male dominated or male mindset. you know why does it have to be this way? And I find more people like that. So that's the gender side of it. And like I said, me being African American, I have to also consider the racial aspects of that. And I've come through a lot of that too. So yeah, that's a lot of responsibility, and it can weigh on you because, like I said, you want to be that model. I've got to show the way it should be, and sometimes it's not clear cut. You just have to do the right thing, and it may not feel good, but you feel like you've got to do it, even if nobody else does it, so to speak.
Well, and even just I think the responsibility for you speak so eloquently and so well on so many topics related to diversity, but the responsibility to have this conversation and to keep having it when there might be other things you'd rather be thinking about or focusing on, especially musically and artistically. But You know, I guess that is probably a responsibility that can weigh very heavily too. But I want you to know that you're doing very, very important work. And I know everybody here on the podcast, we appreciate you, the things that you're doing and bringing to light. I did want to ask you, was any kind of discrimination, especially when you were younger, for being female or for being African American? How aware were you of that when you were younger? And how do you think it affected you? Either way, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that from an early age, I knew that there was discrimination going on around me, but I was kind of raised up to be able to deal with it, if that makes sense. It's kind of like this is going to happen to you, and my mother kind of prepared me to go out in the world, and expect there to be discrimination. Not that it should be that way, but she wanted me to be strong and to be able to fight or just not crumble. I think maybe the first time I faced discrimination, had nothing to do with music. It was me being a young child and, having another girl wanting to, come over to my house. It was a nice little white girl, we're best of friends at school. Um, and she would come over to my house and her dad would, let her come over. But one day she invited me over and I guess he didn't know I was black because my name is Jillian. It's not, I guess, a name that you can assume is a black name. And so when I came over to their house, it was totally like, oh no, you need to call your mom right now. You need to go home. And I had no idea what was going on. I was just kind of floored. My mom came down and got me. And I was like, Mom, I don't understand what's going on. She goes, Don't worry, baby. It's going to be okay. Your friend can come over to the house anytime she wants to. Don't worry about it. And luckily she was able to still come over to my house, but that was like my first experience. I think I was maybe 7 or 8, years old. And that was like first experience of, wow, there's people who actually might not want to deal with me just because I look different from them. And I'm from South Carolina, so I am in the South, and there's a lot of racial divide, and I think the area that I lived in, it was pretty evident, the places that you could go or you should go, you could just tell by the flags that are flying, or I could go in this store and it's okay, unconsciously I just learned, people are not going to accept me, and how to maneuver that. I shouldn't have had to, but I did. Um, as far as going, into the music field, um, I don't think that I really pay as much attention, to any of the racial differences till I was probably going to college because I lived in a predominantly white, city. I went to all the different music camps, like USC music camp. I went to governor school. All the big things that musicians did. I did them, and I didn't pay attention to who was around me. But when I think back on it now, there weren't many people who looked like me at all. And I just became accustomed to being the only, African American, in the crowd. Because even as I went up in high school, the older I got, the less people I would have in my classroom to the point where I was a senior. It was nothing for me to go to like my accelerated classes and things like that. And I was the only Black student in my class. So it just became normal, unfortunately. And so it wasn't really until I guess I got to college and started doing some other competitions and actually was outside of South Carolina. And I went places and people didn't know me. Then all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, I'm playing the same thing they are. As a matter of fact, I can play it better than them. Why won't you listen to me? Why are you not even paying, won't even listen to me, won't even let me talk? And that's when I started to get that, realization of the discrimination, that this is a really big deal, you know. Um, so that's been, a very, I guess hard is a good word for it. I mean, it's been a very challenging road. I'm thankful that, I had a family that prepared me that or told me early on that some people are just not going to like you. There's nothing you can do about it because this you were born, and just the fact that you exist, people are not going to like you. There's nothing you can do to change it, and you just got to be yourself and just do the very best you can. And I was blessed enough to be able to carry that mindset and get through some of this. Doesn't mean that I didn't have times where it hurt me. I would cry, want to give up, just like people do. But I was able to push through. Um, I think I said before one time, I think I came home to my mom and I told her that, people were talking about me. They're saying that I'm bougie, meaning that I thought I was better than them or uppity. And she said, well, baby, you are. You are better than them. So don't worry about it. Do what you do. And I was like, okay, mom, cool. And I just kept on going. So, I always had, that support to just be me, no matter what. I think I tried that road of converting myself and trying to look the part and be like everybody else. The same thing, everybody kind of goes through that. I have to look like everybody else, do everything like everybody else, buy this like everybody else, be identical. And at some point, I said, no, I was born to be me. There's no one else like me. I might as well just be me. And if people don't accept me, that's really their problem. So, that's been my kind of road with discrimination. It's been like an up down thing. And I think the great thing in all of this is that I've been tough enough to go through it, and it gives me the opportunity to meet other people who are experiencing the same things and kind of give them hope, or something to aspire to. Because I've talked to so many people who, not even where I am, and way on the other side of the United States, I feel the same thing. I feel so isolated. This is this and this, and they're like, I'm so glad to see you because now I know that I can keep going, or I can give them comfort or let them know I've been through there. I remember what that felt like. I remember crying and being hurt, and or being hurt by something so bad you wanted to cry but you knew you couldn't because you couldn't show that weakness. Things that we shouldn't have to do, but it happens.
Jillian, thanks so much for sharing all of that, especially some real personal anecdotes. Um, I wonder if you have some thoughts on what you hope your students learn from you about diversity and representation. What should students know? What do you think every student today should be aware of?
I think that each student should just be aware that I think difference is beautiful. We are not created to be identical. If we were supposed to be identical, then we would all be the same color, we would all be the same gender, we would all walk the same, we would all talk the same, we would have been born that way. So there's a reason why we all have been born different, and that's the beauty of life. So as far as diversity, there's nothing wrong with looking different, being different, having a different mindset. You should embrace that. Don't feel like you have to force it, because that's another extreme. You don't have to stand out on purpose, but be okay with yourself. Be true to who you are and just be the best version of yourself. I think that's more so than anything I have for all of my students, whether they're percussionists, they're even people come by there in my music appreciation class. They're like, hey, I'm majoring in English, whatever I talk to them. I'm like, just be you, be, pleased that you're you and be the best version of you. That's what I think as far as diversity. Just don't get caught up in trying to fit this model like this next person. Yes, we have standards and all these things, benchmarks, we've mentioned them before, but you've got to be you and do the very best that you can do.
It's also factually better. I mean, they've done research saying, teams that are of people, more diverse collective, it's like they solve creative problems better, they get projects done better, like their benchmarks are higher when it's teams of diverse people. It was related, y'all. Sorry I steamrolled. And it was short. Relax.
So, well, going back to the gender thing, I was just gonna say, I know we've talked about this before, but like Karli, like audiences can just like be so. I hate to say audiences can be stupid, but like Karli's told me stories about, you know, like she's played a concert and had men walk up to her after and like, I didn't know a little girl like you could be so powerful on a drum. It's like what do you think it takes to play a snare drum or a bass drum? It's like yeah, like yeah, Karli can play a drum loud. Are you surprised that someone of a smaller stature can do that? I don't. It's like not shocking at all to me. But then like Jillian, hearing your story reminded me so much of, I just watched yesterday the documentary called What Happened, Miss Simone, which is about Nina Simone on Netflix. And for anyone that's not familiar with Nina Simone, she is a very famous sort of jazz and soul pianist and singer, and she was classically trained. She studied at a very young age Bach and Beethoven, and she wanted to be the first ever black pianist, black classical pianist that would appear in Carnegie Hall. And she was rejected from Curtis, and it's speculated it was because of racism. And she ended up taking up this career as like a jazz singer to make money. And then she ultimately actually became very involved with the civil rights movement. And something that Karli said that sings so true to me is like, Jillian, correct me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but like you just trained to because you wanted to be a musician. You weren't trying to be a black musician or a female musician. You just wanted to be a great musician. And there must be. It seems like there's a possibility for frustration in having to be an advocate, and you do such a wonderful job with it with PAS. But I wonder, like, does that weigh on you? Like, are there days when you wake up and you just feel like, I wish I could just be a musician and not have to advocate?
Well, I don't know that I'll go to that extreme, but yeah, it does weigh on me. I think what I'd mostly say is, yeah, I wish that globally, we would just be concerned about being great, as in music. That's all I really want to be. I want to be a great musician. I'm not concerned about being, a great, I think at one point in time I wanted to be a great solo marimba player, and I could be the first great black, marimba player. But I'm like, really, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I just want to play the instrument great. I just want to, have anything that I touch just sound awesome. That's really the goal. What color my skin is or what my gender is really should not matter. I would rather somebody say like, wow, Jillian is just like the greatest musician ever. The end. I mean, that's good enough for me right there.
Well, on an unrelated note, but a PAS question I've wanted to ask for a while, and Josh Simonds became president of PAS. I just looked at writing in 2016, and I think we've barely mentioned his name on this podcast ever. And I know he's doing great things, but I don't really actually know all that well what Josh is doing. Executive director, not president. My bad. But could you tell us about Josh Simonds and what he's doing with PAS?
Yeah, Joshua Simons. Yeah, I can.
Simon.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, he's took over as executive director, and he is that I don't want to say support staff, but really he is staff to work with the board of directors. He works with the committees. He works with Diversity Alliance. If I had a proposal for something, say I had an idea I wanted to throw out there, I might put it all together and work with my committee and this, and this, but I would actually bring it, to him and, make my pitch. Here's the idea. And he would be in charge of making sure that whatever I'm doing is within the mission of PAS. Is it, this is this and this, or giving ideas of maybe you want to streamline this or think about this idea, so he has a hand in a lot of different things as far as making sure all of our initiatives stay where they need to be. We're not, trying to absorb too many things in our ideas. He's kind of that go-to person. He's also, if you're thinking about the PAS home quarters, actually going to a location, he's kind of that day-to-day person that is over any other support staff that are there at the PAS home in Indianapolis. So that's kind of the short snapshot of a lot of things he does. He makes sure that We have funding for different things, and there's a lot of things he does.
Awesome, thanks.
Well, Jillian, I do want to make sure we talk about what kinds of upcoming projects you have. What music are you working on? I think I remember on Pete's podcast back, I think you recorded it in the fall, you were working on some recital repertoire. Is that right?
Yeah, I was working on some recital repertoire, and with the pandemic, it has definitely made me, I don't want to say wavering, but it makes me jump around a whole lot more. I've started pieces and like, oh, I love this piece, and I'm working on it. Oh, I would love to play this piece. So I've been jumping around. I have gone back and been working on some pieces that I played before, but things that I may have played in years past, and thinking, wow, I really want to go back and play this piece. Pieces like for two mallets, Prism, the Keiko Abe. I've pulled back out the four rotations, the Eric Samu. Casey, you can what's this piece, Casey? You know what that is?
Let's see. That is what is that? Oh, that's the encore.
Yes, this
On
is my
Harry our
favorite.
encore. Oh, cool.
Yes, I've been
Wow.
I had started that piece
Oh, thanks.
a minute ago and started it and stopped it. It started, and so I'm like, I got to get back to doing that. I
Cool.
pulled back out. I had played your White Knuckle Stroll. That was the first piece I actually played of yours, and made me fall in love with your music. So just stuff like that.
Oh, thanks.
Oh yeah, your stuff is great.
This
Have you
podcast
ever,
is about
you ever
me,
bust,
Karli.
you ever busted a knuckle playing White Knuckle Stroll?
I think like trying to go so fast.
Because I have.
I think that encore is harder. There's some
Yeah. I
yeah.
like to play stuff with a lot of notes in it. I actually find that I always over program my concerts. I never have a place to stop and take a breath. I just have notes from beginning to end. And I think I'm like halfway through my performance and I'm thinking, man, I'm tired, but I got to keep going.
Those pieces will do it for sure.
But yeah, those are the things I'm doing. I have some other vibe pieces I've started. I was going to do a Nate Rosario piece. Um, but I actually have another piece that I was starting to work on, a vibraphone and piano piece. So I've got a lot of kind of stuff I'm just still jumping back and forth to. So, if you have any suggestions of how to hone that in, I'm going to have like 2 hours worth of stuff in a second.
I don't know. I'm enjoying pandemic practicing, and I'm doing some of the similar things to you. I pulled back out Prism too after a long time, and some of these pieces, like even just like taking the time. Well, one student's working on this piece, I'm going to work this back up, and things like it's like normally in normal times I tell my students like winter break and summer practicing is so great. You don't have a lesson every week. You can just kind of explore and experiment, and it's been, I don't know, for me anyway, like a kind of 11-month pandemic practicing session. But I'm enjoying it. Like, let's explore this for a little while. And what's forced me to rein it in is when like, oh, I got to put together a program for this. I got a deadline here. What's the rep going to be? But it sounds like you're doing all the right things and probably just having a little bit of space to let yourself explore and play Casey's music.
Yeah. Yeah, everyone can do that. Yeah, everyone do that.
It's actually why I
funny.
cleared out my room here, is I'm going to have a huge multi setup, I think.
It's funny you both mentioned Prism because I did that maybe 2 or 3 faculty recitals ago, not too long ago. I also was compelled to pull that back out.
Ben, when's the last time you played Prism?
It's
important. The concerto.
I played the concerto.
Right.
I played the concerto my first year here, but I don't think I've played Prism or any variations of since then. But I do like Prism. That's actually, I would say that's like the piece I learned the longest ago in my repertoire that I still would play today.
Right. Yeah. Probably me too there.
What multi is going to go in that space, Karli?
Well, it was a joke. I was going to say like I'm going to...
Oh, like a Casey piece?
What's your largest setup, Casey?
Maybe this one behind me, the timpani.
What's the most expensive piece on your website, Casey?
It's probably this one. Do you know how long it took to draw that? Do you see that?
We'll go with that.
Took a long time. And people are like, "Oh, did you do that in Illustrator?" It's like, "No, I did that in Finale." They're like, "What? How'd you do that in Finale?" Like, yeah, Finale, you can do it. It's fun. It's a fun argument.
Many
That's my
people have
favorite
asked
argument on Facebook. Can Finale do it? That's my favorite one.
Well, I think Casey uses Finale for fun outside of practicing and teaching. But Jillian, what do you like to do to de-stress and non-musical, non-teaching related things?
You know, I love to read. I've always been a reader of books, so I love to read. I like to journal, and then if I'm really just wanting to just totally not think at all, I mean, just turn on the TV and just watch mindless television. That's always the way to do. And I don't think it's really been into these last years that I've actually even been into watching TV. So now I will just binge watch, just shows I never thought I'd watch before, just whole episodes or series, that I'll do that, you know.
What's your favorite show that you've watched recently?
Oh my gosh. I've gone back, and started, watching, Hawaii 5-0, it's an old show,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
going back to the beginning and coming forward. But I always love all those different shows, um, SVU, Law and Order this. I saw they have a new Law and Order that's coming out with Staplers coming back. So I'm like excited to see if that's going to be any good. I'm totally into that type of stuff. Even that show, The Prodigal Son, is kind of weird out there, but I'm like, I'll watch that kind of stuff too. I'm just,
Yeah, I don't know that one. I don't know that one, but we've been doing a lot of crime shows too. I mean, there's that. This is so dorky, but Friday Night Lineup, like MacGyver the remake, and
yes,
what's
American PI. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
gotta watch it. Yeah.
Rad. Julian, thank you so much for joining us today. It's always great to hear from you and hear your thoughts and your perspective. So, thank you for joining, and we'll see you all listeners on the next episode.